Welcome back to another author chat. Today, I'm really excited to be talking with R.W. Meadors and digging into what it's like to write and collaborate with a co-author. R.W. and his co-author are developing a collection of stories that all take place within a shared universe, and the first installment, The Major Arcana, is coming out in 2026. So, with such a big project, I thought it would be really interesting to learn more about what it's really like to develop a book and series with another person rather than solo like most books. So, let's get right into it with the first question. You have a writing partner. Tell me about how do you divide up the overall book writing process, starting with planning and then drafting and editing?
Yeah. Well, first, thanks for having me on. I appreciate the invite. I think this is going to be a lot of fun. To answer your question, mostly we once we develop an idea, we kind of as we're storyboarding, we will kind of discuss whatever upcoming chapter and scene we are preparing to work on, and kind of hash out what we want that to look like. From there, for the most part, we just kind of distribute it based on whoever's available because we're both very busy guys. Um, my co-writer, his name's Jason Marbach. We have a lot going on in our personal lives and our work lives, our families, and everything like that. So getting to write as often as we would like is sometimes a challenge, but we just kind of handle it as whoever's available at any given time will generally tackle whatever we've got coming up next. In certain cases, one of us will have a very strong vision for how we want a particular scene to go, and we'll kind of hold that one for that writer. Or in certain cases, the first book that we've got coming out, the Major Arcana, as you mentioned, is we had to handle that one a little bit differently because we decided to do it as a split timeline for the protagonist, where one set of events is happening essentially in the modern day and the other happened 19 years prior. And in that instance, Jason handled the 2001 timeline, and I handled the 2020 timeline. But we also both kind of chipped in a little bit here and there with some suggestions and little bits of writing and editing with each other's work, which is how we always do. We always go over each other's stuff, and everybody approves everything that goes into it.
I think it's really neat how you're, working within your circumstances. And I know you mentioned it's hard to have time to write when you have, work and family responsibilities, which I think like 99.9% of authors like are living that situation. And I think it's really neat to see that you're working within it and making it work. And I'm sure the project will turn out, different and perhaps better because you're teaming up with someone else who gets it and who can, help carry when one person's busy or one person's unavailable, rather than if you try to take this on as a solo endeavor. I think that's really, really neat and maybe something that people who are limited for time with their writing because they have other responsibilities, maybe working with a creative partner might be something that they could try to see if that allows them to like complete projects.
Right. Yeah, we've found it to be good to co-write because it helps keep us accountable and make sure we're both continuing to get things done, of course, as we're able, as I said. But yeah,
Yeah.
we've found that to be good for us, at least.
Right. I know a lot of writers have a hard time with accountability because they're only accountable to themselves, and we all have so much going on in our lives. So that's really neat that having, a creative partner, like you don't want to let, him down, he doesn't want to let you down. And that's great because ultimately, like you're on the same team. You also don't want to let yourself down, but it's easy to let ourselves down when we have other things that like have to come first in life. So that's really neat. Well, next, I'm kind of wondering what sort of creative exercises work best for you to explore a new idea?
I guess how I would take that is how we come up with ideas more than the actual writing itself. But usually, what we do is one of us has an idea. Usually, me. I guess I'm kind of the more creative force within our writing. But whoever has an idea will just bring it to the table. We converse typically through text, so I'll text him whatever crazy idea pops into my head, or vice versa sometimes. If it seems like there might be anything there that we can build on, we'll just kind of go back and forth. He calls it stair stepping, where we'll kind of, oh, I like that aspect of this idea. Maybe we can do this with it. And from there, maybe we can do this with that. And we just kind of expand from there until we've got something that more closely resembles a story. And then we'll start putting characters into it. Or sometimes I'll start with a character. I'll have an idea for this scene and I'll slap a name on the character and I'll say, hey, you want to do a story about this new character I came up with? And I'll insert whatever crazy ideas I came up with for this sort of character. Hey, you want to do a story about this haunted doll I thought of or something? That's not a real example, but
It could
something
be.
like that. And we'll just kind of build from there until we've got something, or sometimes it'll peter out and be nothing. But that's how we've ended up with a spreadsheet of like 60 something ideas that we are hoping to eventually work through.
So then sort of a flip side to the previous question, what's something that you no longer do as part of your creative writing or development process and why?
I don't think it's really changed since we've been doing this. We started this about midway through 2020, right in the middle of COVID. And the process hasn't really changed. We just found something that worked for us, and we had a good vibe and a good flow from that, and it hasn't really changed. Like I said, it's just kind of on an as available basis as far as creating or brainstorming or writing or whatever it might be. But the process has really remained pretty much the same.
Having the same process for 5 years is really great. I'm sure your work will only continue to get better, but with you two both being in sync by refining that more deeply, like I'm sure that your first book and the continuation of the other stories in the same universe will be really well honed, rather than, let's say, you guys had tried to like crush out the first one and then you would develop it over time. I was just talking about this with a cousin, another fellow like big reader, and we were talking about authors that do series and how sometimes the different works within the series become less consistent, or the author will change, and some of that is normal growth, as even like people who are doing the full-time, the most mainstream bestseller authors, like they're going to hopefully grow and change in their career too. But she was specifically saying she wished that sometimes authors like wrote a little bit more before they started publishing, so that way it was a little more consistent. So I think that, you guys refining your process over so many years will likely lead to, more consistent books from the beginning, rather than if you had just like try to get the first one out ASAP.
Yeah, I mean that's the goal, and I think certainly the quality of our writing has improved as we've gone, just from the experience of doing it more. I mean, both of us have been prolific readers in our life, of course, as most writers are, I think. But so it's like you kind of go into it, and it's like, oh, I know what a book looks like, I know what it reads like, but writing it is a little bit different than just reading it. There's a lot of things that go into the back end of it that you don't really realize also. So as far as making a good idea into a cohesive story. But yeah, so we've like, I guess we've honed the process in small ways, kind of around the edges, is what I
Right.
would say. But as far as the overall flow of it, I think it's really remained very much the same since we started.
Great. And I know just a little bit ago you mentioned that usually your process starts with you having an idea and refining it from there. So I'm wondering, how do you and your writing partner as well, Jason, get inspiration for what you want to work on?
Well, I think like most creative people, we get inspiration from the properties that we consume, the books that we read, the movies and shows that we watch, and things like that. I think that's pretty typical, but we certainly make every effort to take whatever inspiration we get from that and make it into something that's our own. You know, I certainly would not want to just be someone who puts out material that, you've seen this, you've read this, it's just a rehashing of the same sort of thing. We really do our best to kind of blend our individual styles and the things that we're bringing into it and make it into something new. And I think that's a way where having two people involved gives you a little bit more of a different sort of feel than you might get otherwise. there's the aspect that there might be a little bit of difficulty in kind of making sure there's a cohesive voice and cohesive style that comes from that. But I think on the whole, we blend very well and speak in a similar enough voice that there's not too much that needs smoothing over in that regard. But yeah, as far as the inspiration for it, he comes from a little bit more of a sci-fi and fantasy background, and I come from more of a, I don't know, I guess mystery thriller type background as far as what I read. So we've kind of, but we play in a lot of different genres in our writing. Broadly under urban fantasy is what we're terming the shared universe that we're in, but there are a lot of different elements of other genres within that, and there's those come from the inspirations that we've acquired in our lives. So
Yeah, and a lot of the like science fiction that I've read of late, which is not as much as maybe a few years ago, but I feel like there is a lot of good overlap between science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and thriller. It depends on how much of each different thread you want to pull into it, right? Is this like a heavy fantasy or sci-fi universe that there's just a mystery that we're solving, or is this a mystery and there's just a couple different like fun elements, like, and you can play around with that. And but I think it's interesting that you have four genres that have in the Venn diagram of overlap, but having one person kind of being in one camp and another in another camp, you're going to be able to bring like the best and the most interesting and compelling parts of each genre and then play off each other. And as you said, you never want to just like write something that's just rehashing what's already out there. So doing that, like intrinsically, it's going to be a little bit more different than if you were just taking on a project by yourself because you're only limited by the amount that you've consumed. But it's like, basically two heads are better than one. So it'll be really
right, yeah.
interesting to see. So this is one thing that I think is really most compelling selfishly about the idea of working with a creative partner. Like I'm sure a lot of writers would love to team up with someone so they could spend more time on the parts of writing that they like and hopefully not have to spend as much time on the ones that they don't enjoy if they're able to find a, writing partner that has complementary skills. How do you and your writing partner Jason play to each other's strengths?
So we definitely do have different strengths that we've found very fortunately complement each other very well. I was very fortunate. Like as I mentioned, we started writing together in 2020, and what happened was we had a kind of mutual group of friends within a baseball fandom community in a Facebook group actually, and it had branched off into just kind of general friendships. And I had been trying to write for some time, and I was kind of off and on and never finishing anything. And finally, I thought maybe I'll just try working with somebody and see if that helps. And so I cast a net out there and threw something else, see if anybody else was interested in something like that. And I got a few responses. And Jason was the one that I really clicked with. And it turned out that our writing styles and our relative strengths really complemented each other very well. Certainly, we're both very capable writers on our own, but I think it's really been to the benefit of the things that we write that we do have different things that I'm a little better at or he's a little better at. As I mentioned, we sometimes will have situations where we'll like I'll hold a scene for Jason because I know it's something that would be more to his strengths, or he'll hold a scene for me because it's something that's a little in a area where I'm a little bit stronger. For the most part, though, we'll just kind of write the scenes as I mentioned as they come up, and when we're going through the review and editing process, that's where the strengths that we have relatively really come more into play because there'll be a spot maybe where there's a scene that all the good technical stuff and all the information that we want in the scene is there, but it needs a little bit of color. So that's where Jason will come in and he'll jazz it up a little bit and make it really pop. Or there might be a scene where there's like a lot of dialogue and all of the relevant information is being conveyed, but it just needs a little punching up. It just doesn't sound quite the way people talk in dialogue. And that's where I'll come in and I'll punch up that dialogue a little bit. So that's just kind of an example of the ways where we complement each other well.
That's really cool that you have both dialed in, what you're stronger at, and you know that, and you have that like respect for one another. And, you know, I feel like the hardest part of the writing process for me is like being open to feedback. But it's so helpful, right? We
Sure,
need
yeah.
we need that as no book is good without an editor or multiple people honestly looking at it and giving it
Right,
perspective.
for
So
sure.
yeah, I think that's it. My least favorite part is like the initial drafting of just like getting the word. I have the idea in my brain, that is fine, and like the imagining it, and then the editing part is fine. Getting the first words onto the page is the hardest part for me. So which is really rough. But I think that's really cool that you guys have like by your collaborative process of sitting down and planning what's going to happen in each scene, and what's going to happen in each book, that probably is setting you guys up for success where you have an agreement about what's going to happen before you actually like dig in and start drafting.
Right. And and you say that, but it's not always an agreement. Sometimes it takes a while to get to that.
That's too funny because I was definitely going to ask, how do you and your creative partner come to a decision if you disagree about something in the story?
We just that's the tricky part. Even even as on the same page as we are in a lot of respects, there are disagreements that are going to happen about how we might approach something, or how involved a certain character should be in a story, or how this scene should conclude, or what should uh, happen in the next sequence of events to get to where we want to go. And yeah, that's the part that can be tricky. That's definitely one of the drawbacks to having a creative partner, in insofar as it can sometimes take a little bit longer to get to where you need to go, because we know that we both have to agree on something to enough of an extent to move forward. And art is a difficult place to have a compromise, I guess. But sometimes it just comes to, we have to just argue and argue and argue, and hash it out until we get to where we need to be. And we've had cases where we've had sometimes even just a very small detail that we just could not agree on, and we were being stubborn about it because we're both stubborn. And we'll go over it back and forth for, sometimes 2 3 days. We've had extended off and on arguments about how to resolve something. And for the most part, I think we usually get to a compromise point. Occasionally, it'll be a situation where one of us finally just gives up and the other guy gets his way, and that's tally for Jason on this side. And then he knows that, next time we get to this point, the next one, maybe let's give Ryan a little bit of leeway on that one. So
Yeah. I do think that 2 to 3 days is still pretty efficient, right? Like, you made it like, when you were saying this, I was like, "Oh my gosh, you guys are gonna have, like, fights for weeks on end, or, like, you're gonna have to shelve something for a long time." 2 to 3 days feels like pretty good. I've had longer fights with friends about other, like, way less important stuff. So, I think you should give yourself some credit there.
well, maybe it just feels like it goes on forever.
It probably does. It probably does feel that way, especially if you are usually both fairly in sync, right? Like, you obviously like wouldn't be working on a multi-book, universe if you guys weren't in sync. You wouldn't have been keeping at this for 5 years if you weren't mostly in sync. But just naturally, no two people are going to agree on everything 100% of the time. That's just how life works. So I think that, your process is great, and very true that sometimes you just like let the other person have the W and you move on. And you know that maybe next time you have a point that you can pull for the next disagreement.
Yeah, but yeah, it does work itself out. Usually it's not about big things. Like, I think as far as our big broad vision and the big story arc points that we want to hit, we're mostly on the same page on that stuff. It's always just the little details, it seems like. But sometimes that's, what life is, and that's what a story is. It's about the details, so they do matter. So
They
we do
do,
get
they
into it.
do.
But
And it's interesting. I feel so the latest like writing project that I've been taking on was finishing my, debut novel, and I got some feedback from an editor, and they wanted to like reduce the number of details, which is so funny because feedback that I've given to other writers when I've been doing like beta reads for them is like I want more detail. I want to know if there's something that can have a color or a flavor or whatever. Like I want to know what it is. Like I was reading one and it was the characters were having a milkshake and I was like, well, what flavor of milkshake? It was not important to the plot, but I'm like, I want to know because in real life you would have to like pick the flavor of milkshake if you go and order one. And so it's funny that the details are where you can sometimes get hung up on time, and yet different genres, different readers have different like preference for detail. But I love the detail, so I think it's worth the fight. So keep it up. So then this is kind of a fun one to keep playing onto that. But do you find that working with a writing partner makes the overall process faster or slower than if you were to write a book solo?
I think probably a lot of people would assume that it makes the process a little bit faster. I don't think that's necessarily the case. The actual writing itself, I think, is probably a little bit faster, just in the sense that, you've got, two people working on it at the same time, theoretically. So that does, in that regard, give us the ability to do theoretically twice as much writing as one person could do. But that's kind of countered, I guess, by, as I mentioned, we both have to approve every single word that goes into the text. So we've got to get on the same page about that, about particular phrasings or how much detail or whatever it might be. So it's really in the reviewing and editing process where it does take more time. It's not just, well, I can just make this decision and that's what it's going to be. We both have to agree on that. And not just in the creative and writing aspect, but the business end of it also is proven to be a little bit more time consuming than we might have anticipated, because it's not just one guy publishing. We've got to create a publishing company, which we're in the process of doing for ourselves because we're self-publishing. So it's going to require a whole, a bank account that we both draw from that we've got to get set up. And we've both got to do all of the publishing and establishing like the ebook stuff that we got to do. So it's kind of an extra step that not everybody would have to go through as far as the business. And part of that is because we've got a larger vision that our publishing company is Chaos Cat Creative, and we're hoping to eventually make it into more of like a collective sort of situation where we've got other artists and other writers and people doing all sorts of different things under our umbrella. So we're kind of trying to set up with that eventual contingency in mind also. So, but yeah, because of the unique aspects of it, there are a lot of ways in which it does take longer than I think it would take just one person to write a book. But the actual writing goes faster.
Hey, that's a really important consideration for people who might want to work with a creative partner that like if someone struggles with the drafting, I'm the one that struggles with the drafting, that part can go faster, but it doesn't mean that the end result will be there faster because you have a really great point that you both need to feel confident about the final result, and that's going to take some time. Whereas when I'm editing myself, I know like, okay, this is what I meant to say. This is now how I want to like massage the dialogue out and the narration and make it a little bit better. Like obviously I'm in full control of that, and so is anyone that's writing a book 100% themselves. So that's a really important consideration, and I think it's really smart that you guys are taking the business side really seriously and doing it right from the start, especially if you do have bigger plans to make this a collective and all of that. Like you'll be very glad that you did. I know how many like people in history, business partners, like have disagreements over time later, and it's probably because they didn't like communicate and plan it out in the beginning. They just kind of like were like, oh, we'll wing it. It's like you can't wing it. So that's really smart, and it might be one of those things that you like slow down to speed up, right? Like you have been collaborating for 5 years and your first book is coming out, but you have this process that will over time allow you to be more efficient in general because you know each other well and you figure out each other's strengths rather than trying to take this on 100% by yourself.
Right. And, to some extent, the stuff on the business end of it is you do it once and then you don't need to do it for every single book you're putting out because
Right.
you're set up in a lot of other ways. So we're hoping that it'll be a little bit more streamlined once we get to the second and the third and all the subsequent books. But
Right.
it has definitely taken some extra time. I don't know if 5 years, 5 to 6 years is a normal amount of time to take to get a book out, but it definitely has felt like it's been a long time coming.
That's okay. I'm sure it'll be really, really rewarding when the first one is out and you can share it out with the world. That'll be really exciting.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'm so excited for it.
So then something kind of fun. Which literary pair of writing buddies or contemporaries would you compare yourself and your creative partner to?
Well, there aren't a whole lot of like consistent co-writing teams out there, that at least not that I'm aware of. I guess the one that most obviously comes to mind is Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett. And yes, I'm aware of the allegations against Neil Gaiman, and I'm not endorsing that by any means. But the writing is out there, and it's definitely been an inspiration to me specifically. And I know that Jason's favorite writer is Terry Pratchett, and they did work together on the Good Omens book, which we both love very much, and was definitely an inspiration on us. And so I think that's probably the best point of comparison.
Yeah, when I first learned about you and Jason and your co-writing project, that was the first, pair that popped into my mind, especially in the like fantasy realm.
Hmm.
But I will say the only other one that I thought of that could have come up would be James Patterson and Bill Clinton. I know they teamed up on some political thrillers. I haven't read any of those. I probably should at some point, right? Just to be like, is this is this any
Right.
good? I'm very curious. I will maybe have to carve out some time for that this year. But I will say when I, kind of had that question, I was like, I don't know how many there are out there. So I'm glad that my mind went to the same place that yours did.
I think for a lot of people within our genres, that would probably be the go-to as far as something that's got co-writers.
That's okay. The next generation will be listing you and Jason as their inspiration.
That's the goal.
Awesome. So to wrap us up, what advice would you give to any new pair of creative writing partners to help set them up for success on their writing journey?
Boy, well, I guess the big thing is plan ahead, because like I said, there ended up being a lot of aspects, particularly on the business end of it, that we didn't really realize were going to take as much time as they were going to take. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for those additional layers of work that you need to do. But beyond that, from the writing and creative perspective of it, I would say, make sure that the creative visions that you both have are in alignment. And, make sure that if you're working with somebody else, that you're on the same page as far as the direction you want to go with it, and that your goals are the same for it. And, I'm sure that writing with a partner isn't for everybody. A lot of people are lone wolves, and that's great. Whatever works for you. So don't, force it. If you think it's good for you to have somebody to be accountable to, and somebody else is in the same position, then that's great. Best of luck on that. It's hard to find somebody that you can work well with in that regard, and that you can have those 3 day long arguments with, and still come out the other end and have that respect for each other. And we've been lucky that we've forged a friendship out of it beyond just the creative partnership. In our case, we're very lucky, I think, to have each other as a creative partner, to have people that we work so well together with. And so I guess that would be the big thing, is put the creativity first and make sure that your goals are in alignment.
Yeah, that all is incredible advice. And I think it's really, especially important, as you said, to plan ahead, especially because, as you've mentioned throughout this call, like the things that you tend to disagree on are like the small details, but that's because you've planned ahead. And I would rather get in a disagreement about a small detail than like a major plot point. So I think that the fact that you have kind of narrowed it down and refined it and are so close to actually being able to publish not just one, but you have multiple books that are
Hmm.
going to come out. It's because you planned ahead. That is so, so important. So I think that's really neat and really great advice for anyone that might be willing to try this. And like you said, don't force it. Maybe the project doesn't work out, or maybe you get one project and like that's it, and you decide to continue writing solo as most people do. Hopefully, others who are kind of exploring this or considering it will have a more successful journey as a result of this.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to pull back the curtain on the writing process with a creative partner. I know, as you mentioned, there's not too many out there that do this. So I really appreciate you taking the time to break it down. So, next, I want to make sure you can drop a little bit about how people can find you to check out your forthcoming book.
Yeah, for sure. We are both on Blue Sky. That's the best place to find us, really. I'm at rwmeadors.bluesky.social. He is at Marbach, Marbach, .bluesky.social. I'm also on Instagram, rwmchaos. Watch our other socials for details on that, as we will start getting some promotional stuff for our first book that'll be coming out sometime, hopefully in 2026. Probably in the first half is our goal. So just watch our socials for updates on that. And we hope everybody will check out the Major Arcana when it's out. It's a little bit of thriller, a little bit of mystery, a little bit of suspense, supernatural stuff happening in there. We think it's a really great read, and we hope everybody who checks it out enjoys it.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. And I'm excited. I know I can't wait to read it, especially now that I've gotten to learn more about, what went into the process to make it. So thank you so much for taking time to break it down for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me. This has been fun.